Imagine, if you will, a university auditorium, seats stacked in a semicircle to a focal point. Powerful international women from international governments, India, South Africa, Korea, looking at this central point. Powerful senior leadership women from multinational organizations looking at a focal point. I step in to that focal point. I don't speak. I wait for the silence. And then I ask this question. As I have stood in front of you, as I am doing right now, what adjectives, what words have popped into your mind to describe me? And I ask the women to turn to each other and share the adjective, the words that they have used to describe me. Because this is day 3 of the Women in Leadership program. 2.5 of those days have been led by women. This is the second half of the third day, and I am obviously not a woman. So I asked them, what did you think as I stood in front of you? Now, most of the women were not prepared to say, and some of it is not publishable, certainly in the presence of our president. But we heard words like aggressive, alpha, assertive. And then there were nice adjectives like confident and leader and obviously bold. The interesting thing is that we worry in the concept of women's equality or women's parity around male bias. Bias is everywhere. Psychologists have listed 175 unconscious biases. And gender bias is just one. And we need to break those biases like that plate. Because each of us are biased. The women are biased and thinking that men are holding them down, as our earlier speaker said. And yet, the biggest bias that we have is the bias of ourselves. We judge. You judge me, I judge you. But how harshly do we judge ourselves? I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not good enough. In 2010, a young woman came to Singapore from South America. I didn't know her in 2010. I met her in 2013 when she came to me for some coaching. How did you feel, I asked her, when you arrived in Singapore? She said, I was terrified. I was afraid. I said, what were you afraid of? She said, I thought everybody would be better than me. How often do we judge others as better than ourselves? I said, well, what happened? She said, well, I went to work. I worked hard, and I discovered that I had some strengths. I said, fantastic. What are your strengths? She said, I'm focused. And I'm able to make the complex simple, and I'm able to build teams of multinational people. And I said, well, that is great. So what is your problem? She says, but I'm shy, and I don't want to speak up, and I don't want to make a fuss, but I have ideas. She lacked what so many women lack that we talk about in the corporate world as executive presence. Executive presence, the ability to project confidence and gravitas under pressure. She had a narrative, an inner dialogue that was telling her she was not good enough, and yet she was the best that company had. So I coached her. I helped her to change that inner dialogue, that discounting that women do so well. And we stopped the discounting and we helped her change her narrative to believe in herself. Do you believe in yourself? Because when she began to believe in herself, she spoke up. She had a voice. She became brave and she got promoted. And that was fantastic for her that she got promoted. Unfortunately, she got promoted into a project that was prematurely terminated, and she lost her employment pass here in Singapore and had to return to South America. But with her newfound confidence, with her newfound executive presence, she started a business, an import-export business between Chile in South America and Singapore. And she came back to Singapore as an entrepreneur instead of an employee. And I got another call from her. She said, "Andrew, do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes, I remember you." She said, "Can we have a coffee?" And I said, "Love to have a coffee." We had a coffee, and she told me that she was back in Singapore and she had a new problem. I said, "What's your problem?" She says, "I'm now getting so many job offers, I don't know which one to take. Could you help me?" Now, what a nice problem to have. Now, I'm a son of a mother. May she rest in peace. I am a brother to 2 sisters. I am a husband to 1 wife. And I am a father to 2 daughters. And what I want to do with those women in my life is to help empower them, to help them change that narrative that they are not good enough, that inner judgment. It's bad enough that there is bias out there, but the biggest bias is the one that we have for ourselves. As a speaker, as a coach, I inspire transformation. I facilitate ownership. And I encourage impact. Each of you here today has that opportunity for change and for ownership and for impact. I teach these things, transformation, ownership, and impact, to multinational organizations and to Singaporean organizations. And I specifically work with women in leadership because this is where the gap is. And looking at this room tonight, there are women leaders in this room. I also teach it to at-risk teenagers, to disadvantaged teenagers here in Singapore, as part of a corporate social responsibility paired with a charity known as Camp Vision. And in fact, President Halimah Yacob was actually at our graduation for these teenagers last year. And thank you very much for presenting awards and validating the work we do. And we take these kids who are 13, 14, are looking at the floor, they don't feel good about themselves, they've been bullied. And we teach them transformation, ownership, and impact. We teach them to say mine. Just like a 3-year-old when they hold a toy and you tell them that they have to share, they say it's mine. We teach these kids ownership, and they have self-esteem and self-confidence. And over a 6-month period, they can give a speech and stand on a stage like this and win a Toastmasters competition, should they wish. The theme of this evening is to think like a queen. And that reminded me of the game of chess. Do you like chess? Do you know where chess was invented? India, of course. And I want you just for a moment to consider that you are a piece on a chessboard. And I want you to pick the piece that most feels like your personality. First, the pawn. 8 on each side, liable to step forwards and be sacrificed early in a game of chess. If you are feeling completely powerless, then you would be a pawn. Next comes the knight. This is the risk-embracing piece. It jumps forwards, it jumps sideways, it surprises the enemy. If you are an entrepreneur, then you would be a knight. Next comes the bishop. This is a risk-embracing piece. It goes diagonally across the board. It is in a hurry. This is the salesperson that promises the client the product before operations has even worked out how it can be delivered. And then comes the rook, or the castle. This is the risk-averse piece. So if you're working for the civil service, or you're in audit or accounting, perhaps you are the rook or the castle. But then comes the queen. And as I look around this room, I can see a few queens. But here's the thing about the queen. She goes forwards, she goes backwards, she goes diagonally. But she spends all of her time looking after everybody else. She forgets to look after herself. Now, I've written 2 books on self-leadership, one of which went bestseller as per my introduction. And self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. The practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. Your objectives, not somebody else's objectives. Do you know, before we came up, did you hear the song that was beautifully sung? And I don't know where the singer is. And she sang a song that said, "What do I have to do to make you love me?" This is an innocuous, hypnotic trance that you have to do something to make you love you. No, you don't. You need to love yourself. You're already enough. That should be your narrative. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You are already enough. And so as I bring this to a close, I want you to think, what is your narrative? What is your choice? As John Bon Jovi sang, "It's my life." Is it your life? Is it your choice? Or are you living somebody else's narrative? Are you doing something for somebody else to love you? When I talk to young women, and I have daughters, I warn against Hollywood and Bollywood because it says that when you meet that perfect person, everything's going to be wonderful. I remember that movie, Jerry Maguire. You remember Jerry Maguire? And where, you know, the Tom Cruise says to Renée Zellweger, "You complete me." Now I say that any young woman that is still single, if a man says to you, "You complete me," run! You don't want a man that you complete. You want a man that's already on his own. He has grown up and he can be a true partner to you. And men don't look for women to marry who are going to be a replacement for your mother. Look for a partner who is equally leading themselves. Self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So change your narrative. As Mahatma Gandhi beautifully said, be the change you want to see in the world. And as Uncle Ben said to Peter Parker, with great power comes great... I can't hear you. With great power comes great responsibility. But with great responsibility comes great power. As you take ownership for your life and for your choice, you will have great power. And as you have great power, your responsibility is to lift others up. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Lift others up so that they can live a life of their choice and live a narrative that they write and not a narrative for somebody else. So I implore you today, on International Women's Day +1, be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant.